Hello, the pathogen that I'm doing is the bubonic plague. The bubonic plague's causative agent is Yersinia pestis. Yersinia pestis is gram-negative. It's bacillus, single-celled, or it can come in pairs. It does have a capsule, and it's non-motile, so it can't move really by itself, and it does not create endospores. The virulence factors for the bubonic plague are the first one is AIL. With AIL, it helps the bacteria to stick to the cell. The the Y pestis attacks immune cells. So what it does is it uses the AIL to stick to or adhere to the immune cell, and from there it uses the type 3 secretion, which is like a needle. So it sticks on, and then it uses the type 3 secretion to stick a needle in and inject proteins, which will kill the cell or take over, and so it will take over the cell like that. The bubonic plague is spread by flea bites. So currently, the most common flea that it's spread by is Xenopsilla chiopes. That's also known as the Oriental flea. And the most common rodent that is spreading it is the Oropsilla montana, which is the rock squirrel. So it's spread by fleas, and the rock squirrel is a vector for it. So what can happen is the flea can go from various rodents, or they can go to pets such as cats, or the bacteria itself can be obtained by cats eating rodents or roadkill. Also, it can affect other wildlife. Bunnies are another thing it infects a lot. And of course, the most commonly known one are rats. The signs and symptoms of the bubonic plague, the most common, most well known one is the buboes that come usually in the neck, armpit, and groin area. That is when the bacteria they they gather in these areas in the lymph nodes, so your lymph nodes become swollen. They'll also have fevers, chills, body aches, joint aches, headaches, and if this is left untreated, it can turn into the pneumonic plague, which is when this bacteria makes its way to your lungs. This way, it can be spread from human to human through respiratory droplets. When also, if you don't treat this, it can make its way into your bloodstream. When it makes its way into your bloodstream, it's known as the septicemic plague. This is when you'll get the gangrene in areas, and they'll turn black, as you can see these areas that are turning black. So they've reached the septicemic plague. Actually, the septicemic plague can come secondary or primary to the bubonic plague. Treatment for Y pestis, there are no longer any vaccines. They used to have a version of a vaccine, but it was not approved by the FDA. So currently, they use antibiotics to treat the plague. A few types of antibiotics they use is ciprofloxacin, levofloxacin, moxifloxacin, and gentamicin, doxycycline. Doxycycline. The main thing for preventing the plague is to protect yourself from flea bites. So you'll want to wear full cover clothing, especially if you know that you're going to be somewhere where there are fleas. You want to keep free roaming pets free of fleas, which means you want to make sure they're getting their flea shots, especially if you're in an area that's ever had a an outbreak of the plague. Um, Ideally, you wouldn't let your pets roam free. Also, a major thing is you want to keep an unhospitable environment for rodents. So you want to make sure there's no lumber or logs or piles of trash or food left anywhere that would make them want to come come and set up shop. The mode of action for gentamicin is it binds to the 30 ribosome at the A site. So when it does that, it causes the ribosome to misread and misinterpret um, the codon. So when it misinterprets the codon, it will send in the wrong amino acid. When the wrong amino acid comes in, it will create the wrong protein. So this will create deficiencies in the cell membrane and open it up for attack and also make it unstable. That is an aminoglycoside. So gentamicin is an aminoglycoside, and this is its mode of action. This is how it attacks the cell. In 1900, the plague arrived in the United States through a merchant ship. 90% of the cases of the plague were in California and Louisiana. They were all at ports. The epidemic occurred in port cities around the United States, mostly in the west coast of United States, but it did spread to rural locations and it did make its way east. During 1908 to 1925, 496 cases were reported. After that, there was a downtick to until present day. There are currently an average of 7 cases reported annually. With that, annually it's ranging from 0 cases reported to 17 cases. This is due to the fact that there's greater surveillance when they when they receive notice of a case, they go out and they really check the environment. If they check to see if there are any dead animals around. They they kill fleas in burrows and dens. Sanitation has really helped with keeping rats and different critters carrying the flea away. Worldwide, Madagascar is the most common place where the plague is found. They actually have an epidemic season that lasts from September until April. And just from 2013 until 2018, they've had over 1,000 cases. That's in comparison to the United States, who has had just over 1,000 cases since the bacteria first arrived. A case report, there was a 20-year-old female in 2006. She was admitted to the hospital. She had fever for 3 days and she had a bubo under her right arm. At first, they thought she had an abscess and not a bubonic plague bubo from methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus. After 3 days, they gave her a positive result for Y. pestis. She was treated with gentamicin and levofloxacin, and the bubo was completely removed. She recovered after 6 days of treatment. An interesting fact about why pestis is that it's considered a Category A bioterrorism agent because the bacteria can be passed through droplets, and they're worried that terrorists will find a way to um, make it a biological weapon, which there are more on that list. So that's pretty interesting. And it's called the Black Death because of the symptoms of the septicemic plague. Of course, was the gangrene that turned their skin black. Questions for the audience. How would you know if bacteria is gram negative? Though they didn't, and another is though they didn't know the cause of the disease, why were plague doctors' beak masks helpful in limiting the spread of the plague? And finally, while fighting, the Mongolian army began to die of the plague. How did they use the dead bodies as weapons instead of burying them? This is my reference list, my corrected reference list, and the second page of my corrected reference list. Thank you for watching or listening about my pathogen.